This is Tyrese Halliburton, and you're listening to Setting the Pace.
That this ain't a fluke, Pep in the step. That back-to-back Eastern Conference Finals, Pep in the step. That we could win a championship, Pep in the step. And I don't know if it's ever been more peppin' than the step that I got right now, Alex.
Oh, come on. Hello, Setting the Pace listeners. It's Bob Schmidt, host of the Fear the Fro podcast, which regrettably, at the moment, is a Cavalier podcast. I'm a man of my word, so as promised to Alex and Facci, here is a parody song celebrating the Pacers' greatness.
Halliburton for three!
I came in saying the Cavaliers would win this round in 5. Now I'm sitting in my basement as my pod downloads have died. Cause nobody wants to talk about a second round defeat. So to my friends Alex and Facci, here's your anthem now complete. This is Setting the Pace with Alex and Facci, a podcast for all Pacers fans, but Matherin's a Nazi. This is Setting the Pace. We're peppin' and we're steppin'. So go and win a title. I will now get hammered so that I can't be forgetting. Yes, sir. Hold on, I thought of another verse. The hottest shooting team for 7 months can't make a thing. Shepard banking in 3-pointers, Miles hitting everything. A late collapse so painful, Game 5 Hallie couldn't miss. If Ben Mathurin was caught ablaze, I wouldn't waste my This is Setting the Pace with Alex and Facci. Forget the pep, try a goose step, cause Matherin's a Nazi. This is Setting the Pace. We're peppin' and we're steppin'. If there is a heaven, I can tell you one thing: Ben will not get let in. Denied.
All right, everybody joining us now on Setting the Pace. He is no stranger to our show. He is a great friend, and he did a great parody song for Facci and I during the playoffs after the Pacers took down his Cleveland Cavaliers in a 5-game series with a beautiful Tyrese Halliburton game winner in Game 2 to just knock the Cavaliers, all of their hopes and dreams away. It's our friend Bob Schmidt. Bob, I'm sorry for the bad intro for you, but
I've gotten past it. It's almost a new season, and at that point, we'll never speak of it again.
Yeah, I mean, and it feels like this year things could be looking much, much better for the Cavaliers and the Pacers, as we're talking about this on August 21st, because the Pacers do not have Halliburton for the remainder of the season, and number 3 has left for Milwaukee. So that is how we address the former center for the Pacers on this podcast, just so you know. Number
three. Okay.
From Milwaukee. Employee number 3. So today, though, Bob, do you want to tell everybody what we're doing today? Because I was looking for a fun type of podcast to do, and I thought, I want to bring on somebody that doesn't cover the Pacers that would like to talk about the Eastern Conference with me.
Well, you reached out to me and you said, hey, let's do a pod where we talk about the guys that are kind of most in need. This is sort of a make or break year for them. And so we each picked out a handful of guys. And these are guys who, be it individually or for their team's success, are in need of big seasons that could swing their teams in one direction or the other.
Yeah, and so we did just Eastern Conference as well, in case people were wondering. It's not Eastern Conference and Western Conference combined, because I feel like we could have come up with different names for the West as well.
Certainly.
I felt like it was harder finding 10 exactly, because you picked 5 and then I picked 5. I felt like I was kind of pulling here at straws a little bit on some of these names that I picked. Some of them I feel pretty good about, but we'll get into it. So since you're our guest, I'll let you kick things off. Who is the first player that you wanted to bring to the table for who needs to have a breakout season?
Well, I'm going to go with, for my first guy, Atlanta has got a lot of headlines this offseason with all of their additions and changes. Jaylen Johnson is the guy that first came to mind for me. I don't think that that's much of a stretch. I think he would be on a lot of people's list because up until the injury last year, he was trending towards all-star replacement, definitely all-star level numbers. A guy capable of 20-10 and 5, a guy who's shown more ability to be a secondary creator than people, I think, anticipated coming into the league. And this season with a better team, a team that's made additions, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Porzingis, they've moved on from Capella. They have Risacher in the fold. They have, of course, Dyson Daniels and Trae Young. It's at least the first 7 or 8 guys. That's a very formidable team. And I think Jaylen Johnson is primed to potentially compete for an all-star spot. If Atlanta succeeds to the level that some people seem to think they will, I've seen them in these Eastern Conference projections talked about as a 3rd seed, a 4th seed, home court advantage in the first round. If they succeed to that level and Jaylen Johnson is their, either best player or second best player, depending on how you feel about Trae Young, I think he's poised to have an all-star campaign.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of buzz last year about Jaylen Johnson being the, potential all-star for the Hawks, and he played really well before he got hurt. And this is an interesting team, and I think that they've got a good coach in Quinn Snyder, but I don't think I like the sum of their parts for what this roster has been over the last couple of years. It's just not enough. And then they do make the trade where they trade DeAndre Hunter to you guys, and they get back Karis LeVert, Georges Niang. Both those guys are gone from the roster this year. They've made some other deals where they got Kristaps Porzingis, and I look at this group, and I'm trying to buy into the hype, like everybody's talking about, because I think they could be a very fun team to watch, and I think what makes them the most fun is Jaylen Johnson being an all-star level player. Like, he's that talented, and I liked him going back to the draft. I mean, I'm pretty sure at one point I mentioned him as a name that I thought would be nice for the Pacers, because this was before Pascal Siakam was traded to Indiana as well, and Indiana was desperately looking for a 4, and I'm like, I kind of like Jaylen Johnson. I think he's a pretty good player, and I think he kind of just elevated himself so much so quickly with Atlanta that they traded John Collins to get more playing time for him, and now it's just been a matter of, can Trae Young lead this team? And I honestly, I do kind of wonder, maybe you can throw this back, but like, is there a scenario where we see Jaylen Johnson be the guy, the face of this team moving forward, and maybe kind of take the reins from Trae a little bit, even though Trae's been there longer? It could be one of those things where maybe he's just as important as Trae, or maybe he ends up becoming more important than Trae.
I think you can make the argument in terms of to winning that he's as needed as Trae Young would be. I think Trae Young, his future, to me, this is also kind of a make or break year for him in terms of, we don't know how willing he's going to be to come off a max deal. And I think a team like that is having to shore up. I mean, when you look at the guys that they've put around him, there is so much focus on bringing in defenders, and a huge part of that, Dyson Daniels, one of his biggest issues in the Defensive Player of the Year campaign was so many of the analytics were just submarined by playing alongside. Like, you saw the stat that the on-off was better when he was off the floor defensively. And it's like, well, that's because when he's on the floor, he's playing, so much with Trae Young for portions of the season that I feel like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, that's a defensive addition. Dyson Daniels, that's a defensive addition. On one hand, a facilitator like Trae Young, to add the people around him that they did this offseason, I think he has a lot of talent. And to have a big like Porzingis, who, if he can stay on the floor, can shoot, I think they're deeper and better. I like Mo Gay. I like his game. I do think that they have talent. I think the questions for me are, integrating Porzingis and Jaylen Johnson will be interesting, right? Because Risacher, obviously a big priority. But what do you do in the front court? Do you start Okongwu with Jaylen Johnson and Risacher? Would they ever consider going with, 3 bigs out there? Will it just kind of depend on the matchups? Is Risacher absolutely 100% locked in as the de facto 3, or are they going to try to figure out ways to have Johnson and Porzingis and Okongwu all on the floor simultaneously for stretches? I think my only fear with Jaylen Johnson in terms of his ability to really have that year and put it all together is, outside of the health stuff, which has plagued him a little bit, Porzingis is a guy who, exists in a lot of the areas that they kind of need him to go to work. A lot of his facilitation was from the high post and, creating with the dribble. And while he hasn't been, the most safe with the ball, a little more turnover prone than you would want, they've added a big offensive component in Porzingis if he can stay on the floor. So I guess my fear with Jaylen would be, does he still get everything run through him, or how many touches and how much usage will Porzingis command if he's able to stay healthy?
I wonder if they're going to start Porzingis or if they're going to start Okongwu, just to make.
I think they'll start Okongwu and Jaylen initially.
Yeah, I do too, and I think that maybe you kind of stagger the Jaylen KP minutes, because they do kind of like fill the same space of what you're trying to get out of them in certain ways, right? So I could see that. I mean, obviously, I think they'll play together. Like, I don't think there's not a place for them on the court together at the same time. You just got to figure that out. And I think Quinn's very good at doing that kind of stuff. Very innovative coach that's proven what he's been able to do with Utah and now with Atlanta, even with a limited roster. But I'm really fascinated by Jaylen Johnson, and like I want to kind of use this opportunity now to like go to my number one.
Let's hear
And
yours.
mine was Zaccharie Risacher. And the reason I feel like, why do I feel like he needs to kind of have a breakout year? Number one, he was the first overall pick in the draft last year. And I think that there's always pressure from number one overall picks, even if it's not in a great draft class, where I don't think that the 2024 draft class is as bad as maybe people thought it was originally. I think there was some decent product that came out of that. I do think that this is a player that they are expecting, like you mentioned earlier, the Hawks are kind of expected, or there's a little bit more pressure on them to be better next year. I think he's going to take a big step forward. And I think that this is one of those teams where you might actually see him not playing as much in closing minutes. Maybe Nickeil Alexander-Walker closes games out starting or finishing games out next to Dyson Daniels and Trae Young. And maybe he's on the bench watching, and that to me is like, how does that help his growth in terms of a player that you invested the number one overall pick in? I think he finished second last year in Rookie of the Year voting. So like he was right there, like had a pretty good season, 12.6 points per game, 3.6 rebounds, 1.2 assists. I don't think people really knew what to expect from Risacher. And now that you have this 6'8" forward that you've invested so much and you traded away DeAndre Hunter to the Cleveland and basically just said, this is our kind of guy at the wing. I feel like he needs to take a huge step forward. I don't know if it's necessarily make or break for him as much as maybe the other names I have on my list. But I do think that if he kind of regresses this year, has a huge sophomore slump, it could potentially hurt the growth that he has as a player, which could then make it more complicated for how the Hawks want to move forward. Because, just because you get blessed with the first overall pick in a draft doesn't mean you're getting, oh, this is a number one player on a franchise. Like, he, to me, doesn't really kind of fit that mold. I think he's more of like complimentary to a number one. And I don't know if he'll ever be more than that. It's way too early to tell after just one season. But if he kind of stays the same or regresses, then I think that could be problematic for him going into year three.
I'll certainly be interested to see. I will say, we came out of the gate on fire last year, lost 2 games in a row to Atlanta. They're really the first blip on the Cavs schedule. But that late matchup against the Hawks last year, Risacher was amazing for a half. Just absolutely went off. And I saw games like that as the season progressed from him, where, it was streaky, feast or famine. But there were games where you looked at him and you said, okay, well, this guy can kind of do a little bit of everything. He's got size. I think it's just a matter kind of what you said is how comfortable are they letting him play in those high leverage minutes, and who do they turn to when games are on the line?
The Hawks are such a fascinating team. I like the makeup of their roster, right? I also wonder if it's going to be a little bit disappointing when we get to the regular season.
I hope so. That's one of those teams that, like, I get the hype, but sometimes I think people over-index on changes. If you have a lot of roster turnover, and to me, banking on Kristaps Porzingis to be the difference maker, I get the talent he has, but time and time again, and this is the same issue with injuries. There's all these guys that we talk about. There's a lot that are going to come up today where, like, a lot of times the question comes back to availability. And many of these guys that are on my list, at least today, have been plagued by injuries at inopportune times. It's not an issue of talent. It's an issue of, okay, can they stay on the court long enough to really truly get to showcase that talent and carve out a defined role within a team?
Okay, well, let's go then to your next player on the list.
My next player, again, I think I'm hitting the obvious ones right out of the gate. I think Franz Wagner would be my second guy, mainly because of multiple things. First of all, I think last year he was a revelation before the second half of the season, basically. In the absence of Paolo Banchero, in the absence of Jalen Suggs, I think he did more than anybody expected him to do. And the criticisms of Franz remain the same year after year, which is primarily his outside shot. But in every other facet of the game, rather, the rebounding, the creation, the floor game, the getting to the line over 5 times a game. He has a very well-rounded game. The only area that people seem to nitpick is his outside shot. But the big difference here to me is, if I had any doubts about that Orlando team, it's not about the overall talent. Paolo Banchero's a great player. Desmond Bane's a great player. Suggs is a very high-end role player at a minimum. And Franz Wagner's good. It's just that I look at that team now and I'm like, okay, this is a team that's consistently been great at generating free throws, terrible from outside. They address that to some degree by adding Bane. They swap out KCP, who had a bad year, was typically a pretty solid three-point shooter. They add Bane, who's hovering around 40 basically every year, and he's a playoff riser from outside. So I do like that. But I look at Paolo and Desmond Bane and Franz Wagner, and all of them, I think, are capable creators. But I don't know if any single one of them are a guy who I'd be like, this is who I want to be my primary offensive facilitator. And in that regard, I think they have several guys who can do a little bit of everything, several guys who, have decent size at their position and strength and can put the ball on the floor a little bit and attack closeouts. How they all blend together, and if Franz ever sees the usage that he got in those injury stretches to truly break out, because this was a guy doing, like 26, 8, and 7 when Paolo was out of the lineup. And even over the course of the season, a 25, 5, 5 guy that's fantastic. But I just don't know if for the Magic to get to where they need to be as a team, and they're clearly trying to get better, they're adding components and talent, if that's going to provide more opportunity for Franz to do what we got to see when he was tasked. Now, I still think that's a credit to him, that he was as good as he was as the primary option on an injury-weakened team last year. But that would be the only thing that I think held him back, because prior to All-Star break, prior to that injury, I think Franz Wagner had an All-NBA case go. And then Paolo came back, and I think Paolo is just viewed as this de facto one. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, how are we going to feel about this in 5 years? Do we really believe that Paolo can lead a contending, winning basketball team? Or are we going to, as time progresses, feel like, okay, he's an immensely talented player who has across-the-board skills, but maybe he's not the one best suited to run that franchise?
Yeah, I know there's a lot of question marks around Paolo as well in terms of like what is his overall ceiling, right? I would say that I think if you look at the roster, Paolo to me is still the number one with a bullet. And then you're talking about who's the number 2 option between Franz and Desmond Bane. And I think that there's a lot of similarities between Franz and Paolo, where you kind of might think Desmond Bane is the number 2, which is right under your point.
The thing that I felt when we played them in the playoff series was the problem with a Paolo and a Franz is they're both incredible. But when they're both bad, oftentimes they're both bad at the same time. There's efficiency issues there that I feel like Desmond is a lower usage but higher efficiency, lower mistake guy. That those are the types of guys you need around these feast or famine guys. Like Paolo will have a game where he hangs 40 on us, and then he'll go 4 for 18 from the floor in one of the next games. Like that's essentially what happened in that game 7. Is all of them were horrible shooting when they Suggs and Wagner and Paolo. I think that tends to happen more with those guys than it does with Bane. And Bane could be this steadying influence that gives them the spacing they need, that is a veteran player who knows how to play the game right, who doesn't make the mistakes, who doesn't have the peaks and valleys that a Paolo and Franz have.
Yeah, and because to me, like, I feel like sometimes when I've watched Orlando, and maybe I haven't watched a ton of them, but it does almost feel like your turn, my turn with Paolo and Franz. And I think that they can play off each other and have done a very good job of that because they've got chemistry. But when you add an extra player into the mix in Desmond Bane, who I don't think he's someone that's going to need the ball in his hands 24/7. That's not the type of player he is. And if you look at what he did with Memphis next to Jaren Jackson Jr. and John Morant, like, yeah, he was a third fiddle. He's okay playing that role. But you got Jalen Suggs in the mix now, and then, of course, you got guys off the bench and things like that. I feel like for Orlando, if I'm looking at like any weakness of one of their positions, I would say it's probably the center spot, even though I like Wendell Carter Jr. and I know they've got some decent depth at the center spot. But could you trade Franz and upgrade at the center spot? Like, would that make more sense for
I don't think they would do it yet, just because I think
not yet. I'm just saying in general, like, let's just say you're getting off to like maybe a slower start than you expected this season, right? And all of a sudden you're like, Franz is not really putting up the numbers we thought he should be putting up. or maybe he's regressed a little bit. Like the shot's not been good from the outside, and basically you're trying to have to pair him more as like your sixth man, but you're still starting him, but you run him with the second unit, which we've seen teams do that before, and they've got a plethora of talent there in that starting five. I'm just saying, like, and I just throw these kind of things out there because it's just hypothetical, conversations that are fun to me. But let's say the Mavericks say Anthony Davis is available, and like, okay, you can get Franz Wagner for Anthony Davis in some kind of trade package. Like, would the Magic do that? Would Anthony Davis, Paulo, and Desmond Bane be a better three, like a big three, than Franz and Paulo and Desmond Bane? I think you can make the case that it would. So I just think that it all depends on like what player becomes available, and if Franz to me is like too much of an overlap with Paulo, and you feel like Paulo's not able to kind of go out there and be who he is at full capacity because he's having to share too much of the load with Franz. It's interesting, but I think Franz to me is such a good player though. Like, and you talked about it when Paulo wasn't out there, like he was awesome. And so to me, I'm sure there are teams that are seeing that and kind of like circling back to Orlando as like, I wonder if this guy could ever become available. And I think that if he can kind of accept whatever the role is for him next season, and honestly, if I'm Orlando, I might even kind of try to pigeonhole him as the third guy. I almost think I'd rather have Desmond Bane just because of the different type of style that they play. And if Franz can accept being the third fiddle, I think that exceeds what they're, I mean, I guess it makes them reach their ceiling higher, in my opinion. I could be completely wrong, but I feel like Desmond Bane was held back a little bit with what he can actually do in Memphis. And I think there's still more to be uncovered there because he's such a good shooter. And this guy is a brick wall. Like when he drives,
vanity muscles, Alex.
Yeah.
Vanity muscles. I don't know. I see. My feeling is, I think this could unlock Franz. I think he is distinctly the second most talented player. I think where this could really work out is if Desmond Bane remains elite at the things he's elite at. Because to me, far and away, my favorite thing about Franz is when he's headed downhill with the ball in his hands. I think in transition, he's a fantastic player. I think if some of the pressure can be taken off of him to have to, like, look at the FIBA exhibition games. He's like 3 of 18 in the first few from outside the arc, but he's making a lot of the shots inside. I think he knows to keep defenses honest. A lot of times he has to take those looks, but I think in a scenario where he's able to just play to his strengths more, it would do so much more for the team. And I think there is a lot of pressure on him, and especially on an Orlando team with terrible outside shooting. Mm-hmm. If Desmond Bane can be what they expect him to be there, I think it'll unlock Franz to kind of play a game that's not so focused on putting up high volume from outside the arc. Like, yes, he has to shoot better to really maximize his potential, but I think this could be a situation where, it does benefit Franz. I'm not saying that.
Let me ask you this real quick. Just because I heard what you're saying. Do you think that if Desmond Bane's shooting helps unlock Franz, do you think that Desmond needs to be the number 2 then?
No, not necessarily,
Okay.
because I think a big benefit of Desmond is he's a solid off-ball cutter. He's solid at attacking closeouts. In the playoffs, he's historically been a very good three-point shooter. He's always hovering at or above 40%, it seems. Like those type of things, to just know, sometimes it's the threat. It's not the volume production. And I think, if anything, Desmond spending time in Memphis like he did and getting a chance when Morant's been in and out of the lineup to be in those high usage roles and to have to facilitate offense, I think winning probably is more of a priority to him at this point. Way where I think he probably can recognize, all right, me getting mine isn't necessarily what's going to help this team reach the highest. Like, yes, I need to contribute when I'm given the ball, but sometimes Franz, you give him a step with his size and his strength and his speed, he just needs to not get doubled and not get these tough looks, because for as much as everybody crushes Franz on outside shots, when nobody has to be guarded, like the looks are going to be a lot tougher. And I think you see a lot of that even with the German team, with his brother out of the lineup. A lot of the shots he's been taking in these exhibition games are, they don't seem like the easiest looks to me. The efficiency aside, I was so blown away because going into the season last year, I was of the mindset that, Şengün, I would have taken him over Franz in that draft class. And the way he came out of the gate, I still may be there, but to see what Franz did in that first half of the season, I was not expecting that at all. And I thought both he and Suggs played better than I expected in the absence of Paolo. And that's what makes me question the long-term fit maybe of Franz, because I think there's some overlap there. It's not a direct parallel.
No.
But the same way that Kyrie didn't like playing in the shadow of LeBron, like I could see a situation where if Franz keeps taking the bullets for his outside shooting when he's playing in this secondary role that minimizes a lot of the things he's great at because Paolo does a lot of them maybe slightly better, that could be a situation where I see him moving off of one of the guys. But I don't think it's going to be a matter of, you know, Franz not being great and them wanting to move him for that reason. I think it would be more just a situation of they'll try this iteration for a little bit, and if it doesn't produce results, then they'll reshift their core at that point. But I think the moves on paper that they made this offseason, Desmond Bane makes a ton of sense. So in that regard, and I like Tyus Jones, like I like some of the things that they did on the fringes. So and De Silva's been amazing so far in FIBA play, which in summer league, which I know it doesn't mean anything, but I liked him last year, and I think he's poised to, you know, take maybe even another step forward this year. So I think that's a team that's got a lot of talent, and a lot of people are afraid that, well, I shouldn't say afraid. Cavs fans are like, okay, is this going to be a legitimate? They gave us a struggle in the first round, and they're seemingly better, and this is a wide open East, so they could be amongst the top 4 teams. They could, who knows? Maybe they're even challenging for the 1st or 2nd seed if things go well.
Yeah, the Magic are very interesting to me. I think they're going to be very tough next year. I just don't know. To me, their ceiling is the 1 seed, and their floor is probably the 6. That's kind of where I see them at, just depending on if things don't mesh early on and it takes them some time to get used to playing with one another, because adding Desmond Bane is a big addition, but I feel like if he can just kind of fill into the KCP role, he's going to do that way better because he's just that much more of a superior talent. And I think they've got, you know, good coaching down there, good coaching staff. They got a good culture. Like, they haven't really destroyed the roster too much. They've kept their core intact, and I think that's going to be, you know, helpful for bringing in a veteran like Desmond Bane. I'm not comparing it to Siakam for the Pacers, but the Pacers did kind of have their core intact before they brought Siakam in, and I think that did make it a little bit of an easier transition. So I could see that same thing happening for Orlando with bringing him in. And, of course, bringing in Tyus Jones as your backup point guard. I think that's a huge upgrade as well. But it's all up to Franz to figure things out in his role and whatever that is, because that's your breakout player, kind of make or break for this upcoming season. So going to my next person, I'll be quick, very quick with this one. Same draft class, Scotty Barnes. The Raptors, to me, have one of the weirdest assembled rosters right now currently in the league. They're just a lot of wing. They're very wing heavy. They just signed Jakob Poeltl to like a stupid extension, which I get he's a fine player, but it just felt like a bit of an overpay.
That's why Miles left, by the way. He saw that. He saw that Poeltl extension.
We don't say his name on this podcast.
Oh, that's my number 3. Number 3, but
yeah. Yeah, I might have to. I can't edit that out, but I would if I could. I'm just. I will just say this. I think that for the Raptors, like I heard Jake Fisher recently on one of his Bleacher Report live streams saying that the Raptors will be buyers of the trade deadline in a couple of months because they want to win. I just don't see the vision with this Raptors front office and what they're seeing and putting this team together. And it just makes you wonder, like, what type of year will Scotty Barnes have to have for this team to reach the level of expectations that they have set for themselves? Because I get it, Scotty Barnes is a very good player, but he's also a guy that's not played a lot the last couple of years, just 65 games last year, 60 the game before that. And I know they traded away Pascal Siakam because Scotty Barnes was kind of the guy they were giving the keys to kind of run the team now and be the face of the franchise. So I feel like there's some pressure on him going into year 5 next year and, you know, trying to help lead this team to hopefully some relevance, because to me it kind of feels like the Toronto Raptors are just kind of spinning like a hamster on a wheel. They're just kind of going in one direction, but it feels like they're just constantly moving but not really making any moves.
I think the Raptors are doomed in this current iteration. I don't feel that different. See, Orlando, I buy into much more because we've seen on-court results and we know that they have a stifling defense and we know they can generate trips to the line and everybody's fairly young. My concern with teams like Orlando is they've essentially already paid everybody before they've accomplished anything. And the Raptors did the same thing. They, unfortunately, because they sat on OG and Pascal too long, they got into that situation where they brought in Barrett and quickly, and they paid them both. And neither of the guys really probably warrant the money that we're making. You could make the argument, I guess, for RJ Barrett, but you certainly can't for quickly. that deal is looking worse by the day. Then to give that extension to Pirtle, it's like you've essentially committed to this team. They have the 10th highest payroll next season, and this is a team that was objectively horrible. Now, Scotty Barnes, clearly an incredible player, but I think he's an incredible player as a 2 or a 3 on another
I agree.
team. To ask him to carry the load, he does great in all the intangible areas, but when you're a team that needs way more than intangibles in order to win, your primary guy can't be as limited on the offensive end of the floor as Scotty Barnes. And that'll sound like I'm degrading him, but I think he could be one of the best players in the league in a situation that was better set up to utilize his skills. I don't think as the lead guy that you're going, I don't think you're leading that team anywhere. And I like Brandon Ingram in a vacuum, but again, I look at what they did. They gave him around $40 million. It's like, okay, you're right back where you were with the Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby thing, minus OG Anunoby. It's like, okay, you brought in another long wing who's a capable kind of all-around player, and maybe he's slightly younger, but if your whole thing wasn't you couldn't keep this team together because it wasn't going to lead you anywhere, to me, you just kick the asset can down the road, and it's going to, again, lead you to kind of middling results. Now, if they get more than people are expecting out of their draft choices, who knows, I guess. But to me, I look at that roster, and I'm like, that is a ton of money committed to mediocre results, and there's a good chance that Scotty Barnes is going to go through his young prime, at least, just playing for these terrible middle of the pack to lower of the pack squads. And then eventually, by the time that he can, go somewhere where he can compete more, he's going to have wasted a lot of prime years in the process.
Yeah. Well, if I'm looking at this Raptors team, from a distance, like I'm, pulling out, I'm looking at them compared to the Eastern Conference. I feel like they're like an 11 seed. Like that to me is where they feel like they're going to slide into. Like maybe they make the 9-10 spot, but like, I don't know. It just feels like this is a team that I have no idea what to expect from them. And there's been some talk that RJ Barrett, who had a much better year last year, could be a guy likely on the move who's making around $30-some million, which that's quite a bit of money. Like, what are you going to get back in return for that? They've paid a lot of guys, and then they've traded for guys that make a lot of money as well. So it's kind of like, what exactly is this roster? What exactly are they trying to do? And like, I agree with you. Scotty Barnes to me is not a number one. I like Scotty Barnes when he was in the draft. That'd be a really nice fit next to some players, but like, who in the world do you pair with Scotty Barnes that you could maybe get in a trade with the rest of what the Raptors have to offer? I just don't know if you do. And then you also have to maybe wonder, do we trade Scotty Barnes? Do we gut this whole thing and start from ground one and get as many assets as we can? And if I'm Toronto, that might not actually be the worst thing. I know it sounds crazy.
I think there's an argument for that, but I think the problem is, in that scenario, Scotty Barnes is still one of your easiest to move assets. You've got Quickly for 4 more years at $32.5 million, and at least that deal stays flat. But to look at his role and to look at guys like, I question it when Suggs signed the deal, but his deal de-escalates over time. So even if you don't like the percentage of the cap, as that team goes on and they're crunched by the salary situation, he becomes less and less of a burden. But when you look at Pirtle, and in a couple of seasons on this extension, they extended him he had 2 years left. There's no rush to take a guy at that point in his career and that age and say, okay, we're going to give you $28 million and $30 million in 2027 to 2029. Like that, it made no sense to me. It reminded me of when the Pistons, as they were falling apart into old age after that title run in the early 2000s, were like, yeah, we're going to extend Rip Hamilton. And the guy was in his mid-30s at that point. Like this team, there's too many things that they would have to get off where it's like, even if you get something reasonable back for Scotty Barnes, you're still saddled to Ingram for 3 years, Quickly for 4 years, Pirtle for at least another 4 to 5 years. Those are the types of decisions where I think those below the star level player are going to prove so difficult to move that you may almost be just as well to wait out everybody together. because I look at Scotty Barnes, I'm like, that's a guy who would thrive on a team that tried to load up too much on star power, like the Sixers, where they have.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
You plug him in there with these guys, like Tyrese Maxey and.
But see, I feel like you have to get Maxey back if you're Toronto.
Yeah, well, you'd have to get someone because he makes damn near $40 million. But if you're Philadelphia and you can somehow figure out a way to incentivize taking one of the big deals that you don't want, the problem is they signed. I mean, who's taking that Embiid deal? For as good as Embiid is when he's healthy, the amount of money that they committed to him on that extension and the years that are left, same thing with Paul George. It's just too early in the contract that it's like, okay, maybe at some point down the line, you could flip those guys when they're near expiring money. But it would be so expensive to do so now that but that's the type of role where if he could play alongside like truly offensive capable players, all the intangible things he does there are the things that I think that team is lacking.
If Philadelphia would bite the bullet, I think they might consider it. Obviously, the Embiid stuff is kind of scary. But if they could somehow get Scotty Barnes and Jakob Poeltl for a Joel Embiid package, if I'm Philly, I'm definitely trying that. Because I think Scotty Barnes and Tyrese Maxey could be very good together. And I think
McCain and yeah, I think all those guys, like McCain's one of those guys where I'm like, okay, the movement, the quick shot, a guy like Scotty who can find guys from odd angles is really poised to like take advantage of dudes like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just interesting. I mean, maybe if you're Toronto, you keep Scotty Barnes and you trade for Embiid because this is like maybe one of the worst contracts in the league now because of his health, and you package Poeltl and RJ Barrett and whoever to send them to Philly. I mean, I'm just trying to think of ways they can try to salvage what they've done, because to me it's just like they invested so much money into like so many mediocre players outside of Scotty and maybe even say Brandon Ingram, but like they didn't have to give Brandon Ingram as much as they gave. They didn't have to trade as much as they
Okay, of those starters, whose contracts are how would you rank the contracts in order? Because I was looking
Scotty's is the best.
I think Scotty's is the best. I don't mind Ingram's, and I can live with Barrett's. Barrett's is big, but it's not big in this new landscape. Like shy of 30 mil for, a third option on some teams is okay. And the fact it's only 2 years would have me put that. I might say that's the second best deal in their starting five. I would say Ingram is third. And then I don't know how to decide between. I hated the extension for Poeltl so much because I thought it was unnecessary.
It was
less than $20 million for the next 2 years. And you look at quickly, and I think he's one of the worst players in the league making more than $30 million. So he's the one that I think is the worst amongst the starters. Long-term and big money, I guess it's okay that it's flat and it'll get a little less cumbersome as time goes on. But it's a very difficult decision between those two for me, Quickly and Poeltl, as to whose contract I hate more.
And this Raptors roster, I mean, I know they have a lot of great coverage up there in Toronto, that podcasters that do a great job breaking down this team. I know there's some excitement about them, but I do not see it. So let's move on. I think we've got 6 players left to talk about. So
we'll shotgun these. I'll be quicker.
Yeah. On 2 of mine, they're on the same team, so I'll talk about them as a pair.
Okay.
So go ahead with your next one.
Oh, my next one. Well, this is a good place to transition, I guess, to Jared McCain, because he's the next one for me.
Okay.
I think he finished 3rd for Rookie of the Year this year, or at least that's he obviously missed a ton of games with injuries, but had he not gone down, as soon as he started to get minutes, he was unbelievable, to the point where he was terrible in the summer league. He was amazing when he played, in a way that for a guy who's been as injury prone throughout college and the pros, that's obviously a big impediment for him. But last year, prior to them trading for Quinn Grimes, who had an incredible end of the season, Jared McCain had an incredible month where he looked like the runaway favorite to win Rookie of the Year had he been able to qualify. Instead, he goes down with an injury. But I think what he showed, the reason I think it's a make or break year for him is because in bringing in their draft pick this year, I think they find themselves in an interesting situation, very similar to what we talked about with Franz. When Jared McCain was kind of lighting the league up, a lot of that was because of the absence of all the guys around him in the lineup. He got the opportunity to play with the ball, to create for himself, to come off screens, and he played fantastically. But does that opportunity exist with this roster, with Tyrese Maxey back in the lineup with Quentin Grimes, who struggled in Dallas alongside Luka to get looks with the ball in his hands. And then when he got the ball in his hands in Philadelphia, he was unbelievable. Now, I'm assuming he's going to be retained, but between VJ Edgecombe, who had an amazing summer league debut despite only playing in 2 games in the summer league, but one of them came out of the gates, 28 points, 10 boards. He looks like he may become the most valuable asset from a contractual and production standpoint on that team. Maxey, McCain, Edgecombe, Grimes. I think the reason the McCain thing is so interesting is because of what we've seen in the past, where a lot of times rookies have these great years and then they kind of level out as more tape is acquired and teams know how to play him. That's what I want to see from McCain, because he was probably the most exciting rookie to watch when he was healthy. But I think the question that I need to see is, how does he play alongside their top tier talent when those guys are healthy? And how does he coexist with an Edgecombe who's bigger, who has just as, more hype than him because he was a higher draft choice? Will McCain get to play the way that he showed so much promise last year?
Yeah, he was really good last year, and he kind of came out of nowhere. I don't think people realized how good of a talent he was coming into the league.
I thought I didn't believe in him at all. And I was feeling pretty good after summer league because he was struggling to make stuff. But I saw him light the Cavs up, in garbage time games where, he was kind of the focal point and there wasn't a lot of pressure to win, but he was unbelievable.
Yeah, to me, he was more known as the TikTok video dancer.
The painted nails dance guy.
Yeah. Like, he was more of a character than he
like
was
a
a
novelty.
Player.
Yeah.
A novelty, yes, perfect. And I'm just like, okay. And then when everyone's like talking about how good he is and you watch him play, you're like, yeah, dang, he actually is pretty good. So he finished actually 7th last year in Rookie of the Year voting.
Oh, okay.
Just so you know.
I think he was 3rd when he went down.
I'm sure he was. I'm sure he was in the top 3. Because
I don't know if you can even win if you don't play the games anyway, though. So
I don't think he was eligible because he didn't play enough. But that's what they said on Basketball Reference, that he was 7th in Rookie of the Year voting. Okay. So I looked it up while you were talking because I was just curious. I'm like, man, did he really finish 3rd? Like, I know this rookie class wasn't super deep, but he's a good player. And so, yeah, they have so many guards. You know what I mean? And like, that's why you have to wonder, could they potentially make a move? Which I don't want to keep talking about trades every time I do this podcast, but it's just,
I think the debate with McCain is, do you think if you don't truly believe, if you're the Sixers front office, if you believe that what we saw last year when he was kind of leading, a tank commander squad is legitimate, who do you move off of? Do you this is probably when he's at his most valuable, if you don't think that that's true. And with Grimes being a restricted free agent, I think you have to leverage him just to keep the contract, even if you move off of him. Because I would look at that team and I'd say, okay, between Edgecombe and him, those may be your 2 most valuable assets. And if you ever have hopes of getting off an Embiid or Paul George, you might have to figure out ways to bundle one of the 2 of them in order to do it. Because otherwise, you're kind of locked into this group and hoping that the youth that you brought in, while it's cost controlled, can be enough to overcome the adversity of all the injuries you've suffered with Embiid and Paul George and the contractual burden.
Yeah, and McCain might be a better sweetener in a trade too. If you do try to trade Paul George, you say George and McCain for whatever you get back in return. You know what I mean?
Think it's entirely possible, depending on, because this is a team, we've seen them. They came off, Drew Holiday when they were making moves there. He was a veteran, obviously, but they similar type of thing with Marco Carter Williams. He was great as a rookie, but I think some of that stuff was smoke and mirrors, and they came off of him while he was still in his rookie deal. I think there's a possibility, due to the circumstances they're in, that you could see Philadelphia do that. But I think you would really have to grease them to do that. Somebody would have to be taking on an awfully big, terrible contract in order for that to happen, or giving them so many draft assets that they think it positions them well to deal with the financial burden that's coming from these 2 vets that are sucking up most of their cap.
What a weird roster. What a weird team. That looks great on paper, but there's just so many question marks with this Philly team. So I'm curious what you guys think. If you're watching this on YouTube, where you think the Sixers will finish in the standings. So let us know in the comment section below where you think the 76ers kind of slot into that 1 through 15 in the Eastern Conference, whether you think they'll be healthy or not. Just curious your thoughts. But I do want to keep it moving here. I'm going to talk about my next player, and this is someone that is an Indiana Pacer. He started in 49 games last year for the team. With the amount of injuries that Nembhard and Nesmith suffered, it is Benedict Mathurin. I feel like at this point, it's a contract year for Mathurin. The Pacers and him have not agreed to a new extension. He's going to be starting now that Halliburton is out for the entirety of the year. Rick Carlisle said he would get that starting spot. He only started last year because of the injuries to Neesmith and Nembhard. So now it's a huge opportunity for him not only to start, but potentially be a focal point on both ends of the floor for this Pacers team. And I think a lot of that will determine the success of this Pacers team as well. I think that if Mathurin plays well on both ends of the floor and can maybe be the number 2 guy next to Siakam offensively, or maybe the number 3 guy next to Nembhard and Siakam, like just depending on whatever he does role-wise. But we know Mathurin's a natural scorer, scored 27 points in 22 minutes in game 3 of the NBA Finals. Like, this is a guy that doesn't need a lot of touches to get the ball in the basket, but if he's going up against number ones, obviously it's going to be a different defensive assignment. And no, Halliburton does make it more problematic for him because he will have tougher defenders. But I just feel like with Mathurin, this is a guy that wants to get paid. He doesn't want to be in the same boat where he's seeing Jonathan Kuminga and those kind of guys in. And the Pacers, they won't pay him unless he really fits what they want to do. And so now you're looking at other teams that are going to have to pay him. So I just think that for Mathurin, this is a massive, massive year for him to prove that not only he can fit with this Pacers team and how they like to play and be more of a team player, but number 2, prove that he can be a reliable number 2 option on a team that tries to make the playoffs. And, you know, I don't know what your thoughts are, Mathurin. I'm sure you still don't love the guy from the playoff run last year, but he does have potential.
Yeah, no, I think he's found himself in a good situation in terms of his desire to be paid, because what I'd read was, you know, he wants somewhere between 20 and 30 million a year. And I think you'd be hard pressed to do that with this current construction of the Pacers. However, I will say with the departure of number 3, maybe that helps his chances a little bit in that regard. And I do think, similar to Quentin Grimes when he was playing on the Sixers with nothing to lose and he really just embraced everything that was within his game, I think Mathurin similarly will be motivated and empowered to really take a big role in the offense, which should be good for him, and it should be good for the Pacers, honestly. Even if they don't intend to pay him the demand that he wants, a good year for him is a good year for the Pacers, because they'll at least be able to recoup something for him, even if they're not the ones who decide that they want to pay him long-term moving forward.
Yeah, and I think what's really important too, like I'm definitely closer to this because I just pay attention to everything that's said about the Pacers, but Rick Carlisle on our local radio show last week mentioned that it's about the fit, and Mathurin has to continue to try to fit with their system because he's kind of the anomaly with how they like to play. Because he's
very similar to Ty Jerome, the way that people talk about him. It's like the talent is obvious. The question is, are the resources best used on that talent within the system of which he exists?
Yeah, and honestly, like, this is not me trying to just like deflect it all, but I think that if Mathurin were to get traded, like, there's potential he could pop off somewhere else in a better situation because of the style of offense they play, where the Pacers are very fast-paced, move the basketball, share the basketball. He's more of an isolation scorer. Like, he's just, give me the ball, get out of the way, and he'll create fouls. Like, he's very difficult to guard. And
that was one of my most frustrating things. That's why I still kind of believe in the guy as much as I dislike him.
Yeah.
His ability to get to the line as a true rookie. It's like, how does this guy have this kind of level of respect already? Like, it was crazy to me. And we didn't see it as much last year because I think obviously it's been that battle of, you know, him finding his way within that system.
And the league has changed how they officiate physicality too. I mean, his rookie year, they were still calling a lot of tic-tac stuff at the rim. And this past year and the year before that, it started to slowly fade away and allow more physicality, which I think is better for the league. But yeah, there was a lot of times where he probably should have gotten foul calls that he didn't. But he's just a bucket maker. And that's the thing about Mathurin. Like, he can put the ball in the basket. And, you know, Carlisle talked about how he shoots effortlessly from like 35 feet. Like, he can just really like let it.
What is your expectation if you had to predict his stat line based on, you know, where you're at right now?
Well, I'll tell you this. Facci asked a good question a couple of weeks ago and said, is it more likely he gets traded at the deadline or he leads the team in scoring? It wouldn't shock me if he got close to 20 points a game. I mean, I think he was around 16 and a half last year, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe closer to 18 points per game is more realistic of a jump. But I think if he can get around 18 points per game, play around 32 minutes a night, start, that's going to be huge. But I don't think the points are the main thing. I think for me, it's the defense, because when you lose Halliburton, like, Halliburton's not a great on-ball defender, but Halliburton's a very good team defender within the scheme. and we saw him do a very good job of getting help side blocks and steals throughout all of this, all the regular season, but even the playoffs. Like, he was much better in that. He got more physical too defensively. I just think they're going to ask Mathurin to do more because they can't have Nembhard guard the other team's best player every single night and then run the offense as well. Like, that's just going to exhaust the guy for 82 games. And Nembhard's not really been a guy that's been able to do that and play a full 82 game season for the majority of his career. He's had these little nicks and, knick-knack injuries and things like that where he's had to miss a handful of games or weeks, whatever. So I just think for Mathurin, like, we know what he can do offensively. I think defensively, if he can showcase that he can guard the elite talent in the league without getting beat, then that'll help him get a better payday, and I think it'll help him grow as a player. But I also think, like, if you go back, and it sticks out to me like crazy. I was watching like a hawk during preseason against the Grizzlies. Like, the Grizzlies had nobody at this time except Desmond Bane was playing, and they put Mathurin on Desmond Bane. Desmond Bane cooked Mathurin the entirety of the game, on ball and off ball. Just Mathurin ball watches way too much. Screen navigation's terrible. So I'm just hoping that he can take some steps forward defensively and showcase, like, I'm a two-way guy, because he's said that multiple times in the last two off seasons. I want to prove that I'm a two-way player, but all we've ever seen is mostly one-dimensional, and that's offense, and the defense has got him pulled out of playoff series. Like, if you look at Game 6, I think it was, against the Knicks, he was guarding OG Anunoby and got beat like twice on back-to-back possessions, and Carlisle pulled him out for the remainder of the half. Like, that's just where he's been at. Even though he'll have big games, he'll also have games where you just really can't play him.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good pick. When I saw that on your list, I was like, yep. I mean, I guess I should assume the Pacers guy's going to.
Well, I mean, if you would have picked him, it'd been great. I was going to pick a Cab person, but I was like, which Cab player do I pick, and which one makes the most sense? Like Mobley? I don't know.
I feel like that'd be too easy. It's like,
but it's also like he's a defensive player of the year. Like,
yeah.
He's
how much more?
Out,
how much more? Yeah, breakout. I mean, the guy was all NBA defensive player of the year.
Yeah. So
okay.
You have two left, or
I have two left. Yeah. Charlotte Hornets, Brandon Miller. That's my next guy. I think he's one of these people who I look at that team and I look at the roster and I even look at the Colin Sexton being added to it. I'm like, okay, you've got offensively talented players who are just, I mean, it's crazy to say, but LaMelo might be the best of those three in terms of defensive players. Brandon Miller should have all the physical tools, but I think he's falling prey to a lot of the same things that I hate about LaMelo's game, which is, last year he shoots sub-league average from three-point percentage, like 35.5 on 11 attempts a game. And LaMelo's really not much different. Those two, the way that I just hate the way that they play. And I think when you're in those situations where you're on a losing team and you're empowered to basically be the guy or the second guy, depending on how you look at Brandon Miller, I don't think it's benefited him. His true shooting percentage regressed. Yes, his scoring went up, but the volume and the places he takes his shots, I don't think those should be necessary for a two guard who's as big as Brandon Miller. I think he needs to, play to his physical advantages a little bit more and not settle for so many outside looks. I also think defensively, he could be perfectly capable. I thought he looked better defensively as a rookie than he looked in his second year. And I think that part of that is the system. Sometimes, you get used to losing, you get into bad habits, but that's where the team really needs to shift. And I think their pick with Knepel is one of those things where good culture, a team that he came from and doing, it's like, okay, that may be something which works out for them as a draft pick. But Brandon Miller, I don't think it's an issue of talent. I think it's an issue of defensive buy-in and shot profile. Those would be the single biggest things for me, because he's another one of these guys can just rip off a ton of points in a row and you think, my God, he might be the best player out here on this court. And then when he's bad, he's really bad.
No, it's a great pick. And when I saw this on here, I was like, yeah, I love this pick because he's so good. And I was like praying that he would like somehow fall in the draft or the Pacers would trade up to get him, because I think this is the same year that Jarris Walker got drafted. So I was hoping that the Pacers would jump up, because he said his favorite player was Paul George growing up. And, early Paul George was pretty raw as a player. It took him a couple of years to kind of figure things out. I would say by year 3, Paul George really kind of broke out. So this is the perfect time, right? Because this is year 3 for him, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So it's a perfect opportunity. This is a weird Hornets roster. I don't really know what to think. I know some
Well,
people.
he's back, baby. It's all uphill from here.
I know, right? It's like I've heard people say like, "Hey, don't sleep on the Hornets. Like they're going to be better than people expect." I'm like, but I'm expecting them to be like the 14 or 13 seed. So like, how much is better? Like 11? Like you know what I mean? So it's like, I I think LaMelo Ball to me like this guy's more worried about getting like flaming hot Cheeto tattoos on his feet, right? Was that what he did? Or his hand?
Somehow we got the Hornets for rivalry week, and I think it's entirely because Lonzo Ball is on the Cavs. But
That's it. Yeah, Alonzo, and because they did like the two brothers because they have the Rockets and the
Lonzo
Pistons,
brothers,
and I'm
yeah.
like, how are they a rival? Like, yeah,
I just hate the way that team plays, and I think a big part of it is
but I
based
like
on
their coach.
Brandon Miller and Ball. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because if you were to just show me their roster, I'd say yeah, they got talent across the board.
Hmm.
I think the style of play, I think and it happens with young teams to a certain extent. I think veterans can kind of change that presence, but I was underwhelmed. I was expecting huge things out of Brandon Miller in year 2, and I was underwhelmed by what we actually saw.
The culture in Charlotte just kind of feels like not serious.
Feels transactional to me. It
Yeah.
it feels like that's where people go, and they're fine being there if it's going to showcase and get them some numbers. But I feel the same way, and I don't. And these are not comparable players, obviously, but the way that when you're a Cavs fan and you hear people talk about Browns acquisitions, and you go through this offseason where Myles Garrett doesn't want to be there, but then he just takes the money. That's the same way I kind of felt about Miles Bridges, where I'm like, okay, he doesn't even seem happy, but they offered him enough money. He's like, yeah, sure, I'll play here. Like, I don't know if I believe. I think this is, as much as it's huge for Brandon Miller, I think this year is a big indictment on the leadership of LaMelo Ball, because this
Oh
is
yeah.
who dominates in the fan votes, puts up huge numbers. He was near the top of the league in scoring last year heading into All-Star break, but nobody bought it. Like nobody looked at that and said, okay, this is legitimately the way that we want a guy to play. People have bigger expectations, and they should, because he's immensely talented. But sometimes it feels like, he's just more interested in playing his style of ball than playing a winning style of ball.
Yeah, I just don't. That's what I mean by the culture too. Like, because he's kind of the face of the franchise too at this point, and it's like, at what point do you move on? At what point do you think you got to turn the keys over to somebody else? Maybe it is Brandon Miller you give the keys to.
Would you sooner move Ball or Miller? If I told you got to
Oh,
trade,
Ball in a heartbeat.
and is that related at all to the contract situation, or is it solely
I
based
think
on?
it's all of it. I think it's all of it together. He's not a true leader to me. He's been injury prone throughout his career. I think that the money, obviously, you're gonna pay Brandon Miller a good contract when he's due for one. Just the matter of, like, it's just the nature of the business. But I just think with LaMelo, like, the sample size has been large enough to realize like he's never going to be taken seriously as a leader. I think that if he's there, he's always, it's like a worse version of the Hawks with Trae Young. Like, that's just kind of how I feel about LaMelo. Even though I know he's put up some ridiculous stat lines when he's been healthy and things like that, I just feel like a change of scenery would be good for him as well. And I think Brandon Miller like kind of is like what Charles Lee and the Hornets want to be more so. And I feel like LaMelo is kind of holding them back. So that's how I view it. And you talk about Miles Bridges and him taking that money and things like that. I don't think there's any other team that's going to pay Miles Bridges for all the off court stuff too. So
No, I don't think so. But to all the posturing about how annoyed he was with how the negotiations were going,
oh
and,
yeah,
and it's like, okay, well, I guess this is the most I get. I'm happy. I'm back, guys. Let's run
I
it back.
have to be.
Like that's more what I mean. It's like there's all this tough talk, and then it's like ultimately,
Well, same with Gordon Hayward, right? Remember when Gordon Hayward signed that contract there with Charlotte because he was wanting to go to Indiana, and the Celtics refused to do a sign and trade with the Pacers because they didn't like the Pacers package of Turner, McDermott, and Aaron Holiday. So they were like, well, we want you back here because you're better than that package. And he was like, all right, I'll call your bluff, and like went and signed that deal with Charlotte. They ended up doing a sign and trade, I think. But it was almost like, why do you want to go to Charlotte? Like, Boston didn't care that you wanted to go to Charlotte. You going to Indiana would make a difference because they knew that you could, like, they want to win, and they're going to do their best to put a team around them to win as many games as possible. Where Charlotte, I don't know. They had one good year where they made the playoffs, I think, right? I mean, I don't know. They've made the playoffs a few years since they've been the Bobcats and rebranded to the Hornets name again. But this is just a very unserious franchise. And
I'll tell you, the one guy I do love on their team though is Diabate. I love that guy.
Yeah,
I can't get off of there because he's the one who plays with the type of commitment to like hustle.
Charles Lee player.
Okay, it's completely wasted on this roster But in other situations, he's one of those guys where, like, when I looked at your depth chart at center, I'm like, let's move him over there. You know, you got an opportunity. He's got all the heart in the world. Your team plays that style of just frenetic energy all the time. I would love to see that, but I think
let's see if it happens.
It's wasted in Charlotte. So, okay, number 4 for you, right?
I have 2 players left, so I was going to do them together.
Okay, yeah, rip them off.
So I'm going to Detroit, and you could probably pick 4 guys from Detroit if you really wanted to like nitpick. But I picked 2. I picked Jaden Ivey and Jaylen Duren. I think they're both in the same draft class as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right. Yeah, because they're both coming up on contract decisions.
Yeah, and that to me is a big part of it. I think with Jaylen Duren, we'll start with him. He's been able to stay healthier than Jaden Ivey throughout his short career. The problem with him is when they play floor spacing bigs, he's not been able to stay on the floor. This is a guy that is fine in drop coverage, but when it comes to guarding bigs that can spread the floor, he's been atrocious. And I've seen number 3 for the Bucks when he was with Indiana really, really struggle. I mean, I saw Jaylen Duren really struggle with him. Wasn't able to guard him because he just spreads the floor and like they get him out in space and he can't recover as well. And I think he's very good at rebounding, blocking shots. Like everything he does, like, yeah, he can expound upon that and get better, sure. But like, I don't think you're going to get much more out of him in terms of offensively what you're expecting. I just think defensively, if he can be a little more of a high IQ basketball player, because if you're going to the playoffs, and this is a team that a lot of the Pistons are a team that a lot of people believe in, right? They think, oh, this could be a 4 seed. Like this is a team that could make it to round 2. Cade Cunningham's got like MVP level talent, whatever. I mean, people are arguing that he might be one of the best players in the Eastern Conference behind Giannis. Like there's been debates about that, or maybe it's Jalen Brunson. Who is it? But I feel like with this Pistons team, if they're playing beef stew in closing minutes over Jaylen Duren, that does not bode well for Jaylen Duren's future. And so I think he's going to have to learn how to stay on the floor in close games where they matter the most, because last year Beef Stew was hurt. And so we had to see Jaylen Duren out there at times. And I feel like it's going to be difficult for him to do that. Now, before I can jump into Jaden Ivey, who is my second guy, I want to hear your thoughts on Jaylen Duren real quick.
He's one of those guys that you show flashes all the time, but I think, you know, it's not dissimilar entirely to the way that I felt about Andre Drummond towards the end at Detroit, where great rebounder, wants to put the ball on the floor maybe a little more than you actually need him to. And I think that's the issue sometimes with Duren is he has the athleticism. He's a great rebounder. He can do a little bit at times, but I think he presses it too much to the point where you're like, the fact that a complete lunatic like Beef Stew is the reliable one in crunch time is, I think it speaks to the fact that this is, we should be past the point where Duren is making some of these poor basketball decisions. I don't think it's a matter of his talent. I think, you know, the guy can gobble up rebounds. He's great at taking advantage of, you know, rolling and being left alone on dump offense and things of that nature. But I think sometimes he tries to do a little bit too much. And I think part of that is because, of course, he wants to be paid. He wants to have a bigger role within the offense. But I just don't know if it's always what's best for the team. And I think that's the biggest thing, is finding that balance between the talents you have that are actually applicable in a game situation and the ones that you really shouldn't be doing on an NBA stage because it creates as many mistakes as it does opportunities. So
no, those are all great points. And Jaylen Duren is just, he's a talented player and he's still very young. And I think you got to kind of put that into perspective too, like drafted at like 19 years old. So very young big that still has plenty of room to grow, and you don't want to give up on talent too much. But I just think as the Pistons kind of cross into this next phase of this group of trying to be an actual playoff contender, pressure is going to build up for that center spot. And they might feel like, hey, we need to address this if he's not going to be a reliable long-term option. So this is a great opportunity for him to prove that he is, because
what do you think his price tag comes in at? Because Beef Stew got, I believe, 14 mil a year or so. And obviously,
question,
you know, inflation, it's probably going to come up more. But I'm curious how much of a separation you feel like there is between the contract that Beef Stew signed and what Duren is going to get. Do you think Duren eclipses 20 mil a season?
I was going to guess around like 17 to 20 million per year.
Okay.
But yeah, it's hard for me to gauge the market now because
me too. And this is the other thing I'll say is JB is one of these guys who he's going to play the people who play the style that he wants to play. So I think he could have a big hand in submarining the perception of Duren around the league if Duren comes out and finds himself in JB's doghouse.
Could Nick Claxton be a better fit than Jalen Duren?
You know, if you'd asked me a year ago, I would say 100%. I just felt like Claxton really regressed hard in a situation where he should have ascended last year. So I think it's hard to say. I do think I think in a situation like that, I don't want a guy who tries. I want a guy less is more in a scenario like that. And in some regards, I think, Duren's got good footwork and, a great rebounder, and he's relatively good on the offensive end. I just don't like a lot of his defensive decisions. But if you'd asked me a year ago, I think most people thought Claxton was amongst one of the best defenders in the league, and I thought he looked downright bad sometimes in Brooklyn this year, be it his energy or his engagement or just some of the decisions that he made. So I think it's one of those situations where if you ask me which one I'd want straight up, I might say, Claxton makes 25 mil-ish. You could sell me on either route.
I'm just thinking out loud because I kind of feel like Claxton is one of those guys that's kind of in the same camp in terms of like, tiers ranking wise. If you're looking at Jalen Duren, because Duren's ceiling is higher. I'll be honest with you on that. Like I think that his ceiling is pretty intriguing, but I do worry about him being more of like closer to his floor.
I think Duren's ceiling is higher is because he's been in an environment where he's been allowed to showcase some of those things, and Claxton tends to play more within a defined role. But for a JB Bickerstaff team, I think JB would get more out of a guy like Claxton.
Yeah,
because I think like a rugged defensive team, if you had Claxton in place of Duren, it's not like you're taking a massive step back offensively. Mm-hmm. It's not like they rely on Jaylen Duren to be this huge component within their offense. I think what they would gain on a defensive end, and just as a handcuff with Beef Stew, where it's like, okay, if you lose Beef Stew, you're not relying on, the guy that's protecting the rim to be, one of the weaker defenders you have in terms of just fundamentals. Claxton's not that guy. And plus, I will say this. I say this with any guy on that Brooklyn roster, be it Cam Thomas or whoever. I think guys take a lot more bullets when they're on just terrible teams. Because it's easy to assume that they're all bad and that, I don't think you can quantify the way that culture may impact buy-in and the way that guys are playing. And I'm not saying it'd be great if everybody tried their best and was fantastic all the time, but I think a change of scenery could do well by Claxton because he's already got the payday. Yeah. What keeps him motivated at this point? Nobody wants to just go out and play and lose every single night. So
yeah, he makes a lot of sense there as like a replacement for him if you do trade him. And I feel like Jakob Poeltl is another name that we've mentioned could also be a nice, swap as well. I know that they extended Poeltl, so maybe that's what something like Toronto wants, or not Toronto, but Detroit.
I wouldn't do that deal if I'm Detroit. I'd rather just see what you can get in a sign and trade for Duren if you're not going to keep him, because it's just such a long commitment from Poeltl, and it's not like Poeltl. I mean, he's pretty long in the tooth already. So,
well, they've wanted a shooting big, which has kind of been like their thing. Like they were targeting number 3 from the Bucks. They were targeting Naz Reid, and I know Naz Reid got paid quite a bit of money too. So it's like, who's the other floor spacing big out there that makes a lot of sense that could be available?
Should have taken my boy Maxime Renaud, who went to the Kings. That's who I wanted in the draft. But
knowing the Kings, they might trade him.
Yeah, we'll see. So who was the second guy?
It was Jaden Ivey. Jaden Ivey was the other guy.
Oh, you said Jaden. Yeah. He was looking great before he went down with that injury. That was certainly. I need to see what happens in terms of, this whole Beasley situation playing out and everything else. But I thought that team way overperformed last year. Well, I shouldn't say overperformed.
Can I tell you why I think they overperformed?
Sure.
I think Dennis Schroeder was the difference maker for that group. Dennis Schroeder got traded like 3 times last year, but he found a spot in Detroit where I felt like he was the perfect secondary ball handler next to Cade Cunningham to kind of alleviate some of the pressure. And I'm not the biggest Dennis Schroeder guy, don't get me wrong, but like when he finds a groove with a certain team, like whatever team that he's, jiving with, he can be very impactful. And I felt like the way that he played is what got him eventually that contract out in Sacramento to kind of be their lead guy, because they're number one, they need a point guard. And it's kind of crazy to think the Kings need a point guard now after having 3 point guards at one point where they're making trades and they just don't really seem to know what they're doing. But I look at Jaden Ivey and it's like, can Jaden Ivey replicate the same amount of success that Dennis Schroeder had last year, specifically in the playoffs and even some down the stretch? Because I'm not saying that Jaden Ivey is worse than Dennis Schroeder. I'm not saying Dennis Schroeder is better than him. I'm just saying the impact that he had on that team last year to me was significant. And maybe I'm overhyping what Dennis
Oh,
Schroeder did.
I feel the same way. I feel him and Beasley were just so pivotal.
Yeah, and you lose Beasley now, and you bring in Duncan Robinson.
And they bring in two Michigan guys, get like LeVert and Duncan Robinson, like and the
notoriously bad defenders.
Not to mention, LeVert was hit or miss with JB in Cleveland. The fact that they went back to that well and they paid him, he got more money than Ty Jerome, which is a subject for another podcast. But yeah, LeVert and Robinson, and then poaching Javonte Green from the Cavaliers too. It's like, all right. I mean, I like a lot of their components, but I will be very curious to see how this year goes because they did lose a lot of depth. They added a lot of depth, but there was a lot of turnover. Fontecchio.
I don't like their moves.
Tim Hardaway Jr. and Schroeder. I don't love them, but then again, it's one of those things where I'm like I really don't think they did much to replace people, and I think Beasley, if he doesn't end up playing, like that is a huge hit.
I think they took step backs, and in terms of who they replaced their players with, maybe you get an upgrade of Karis LeVert over Tim Hardaway Jr. But Tim Hardaway Jr. still started.
Maybe over Tim Hardaway Jr. But if you're looking pieces out, if you say Schroeder, Tim Hardaway Jr. Both out, and then possibly Beasley, and what you brought in return is LeVert, Robinson, and Javonte Green. I don't like that trade out at all.
Now your trade out would be that Jaden Ivey has a great year, and I think
but
similar to Ben Mathurin.
Like that's one of those things where it's like I'm not going to count Halliburton as an addition when he returns next season. Like he's always there. It's just they're the benefactor of being healthy, but the reality is how many teams make it through the postseason with their roster intact? It's very rare.
It's very rare. But I will just say, like, if they can have Jaden Ivey kind of take a leap and be like,
I think he could do 20 points a game. I mean, I think that's entirely possible. He was looking way, way better in that system than he had in the previous iteration. Like the difference between Jaden Ivey in the Monty Williams era and Jaden Ivey in the JB Bickerstaff area was night and day.
Yeah, so great point.
I got one more guy.
Let's get to it.
Ware in Miami, Kel'el Ware. I think he's one of these guys who at moments looked like he could be the front runner for rookie of the year. And then at moments he looked completely lost. And I think Miami is a situation that is terrible to be like, it's a blessing and a curse to play alongside Bam Adebayo, because hopefully you learn a lot of things from him. You pick up a lot of fundamentals, incredible veteran, great in so many facets. But I think it exacerbates the issues with Ware, which is that it's not that the tools aren't there. It's not that he hasn't shown flashes of being capable, perhaps of someday being a stretch big and being able to defend the rim. But he had a lot of the same things plague him that rookie big men do, which is, he doesn't have a lot of weight. So a lot of times I felt like he made fundamentally bad decisions, whether it's, coming too high on pick and rolls or getting taken off his spot because he weighed not enough to hold his ground despite his extremely long frame. If he can just make the normal progressions, I think he's in a great situation, because Miami has been retooling that roster and offloading people, and they basically gave Haywood Highsmith away for nothing. He's going to have an opportunity to show, okay, can I put it together? Because I don't think it's a matter of physical promise, and you guys would know this better than anyone, having seen him at Indiana. I think it's a matter of basketball IQ and decision making. And if you look at how he performed as a rookie, statistically speaking, it was pretty solid. I think where I felt like he was lacking is when I watched him in matchups against established veteran big men. I thought they took advantage of all the typical mistakes you see from young guys. Now, I thought it was incredible that Miami gave him the opportunity, because this is not a team that, like a veteran team oftentimes will not let guys play through their mistakes. But I thought that they did that, and I'm hopeful that for his sake, it will fast track him to a much better year too.
Well, and just to piggyback off that, think about this. He played with the Summer League team this year and got called out by Eric Spoelstra about handling the game at a mature level. And that's always been a situation with him going back to Oregon. He was with Dana Altman, didn't like the way that he was coached hard by Dana, transfers to Indiana where Mike Woodson's at, knows that Mike Woodson has a history of getting guys drafted. And, he ends up going, I think, 16th overall to Miami, something around that time frame there in terms of the draft.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of the draft. And I would love nothing more than for Kel'el Ware to pop off to pop off in Miami and then force the Heat to make a decision between him and Bam. Like, can they play together, or is like one better on the court without the other? And like, why does Ware potentially make more sense than Bam just because Ware's a great 3-point shooter and like he's got all this upside because he's very talented. Like there's no doubt about it. It's just the motor and it's the consistency for him. And in year 2, like you're hoping that he doesn't hit a sophomore slump because he did have a great rookie season. But I think also the success of Miami is going to determine a lot on how good he is this year because yeah, they went out and got Norman Powell. I thought that was a nice pickup for them. They've got Tyler Hero still.
Yeah, they didn't have to do. He basically just got put in their lap.
I know, like they didn't do anything to get him, but like very, very, very good player. Like was an all-star level player last year in the Western Conference. Like that tells you how good he was playing for the Clippers. So I think that there's something there. I just kind of wonder, like, do you play him and Hero together? Do you start Mitchell? Do you bring at the point? Do you bring Powell off the bench? Is he okay with that role? Like they're definitely good, but I think that for Kel'el Ware specifically, it's just going to have to be about finding the spot you fit in correctly and maximizing those opportunities, but also playing at a high level motor-wise when you're not involved offensively. And I do almost get a little nervous for him where he might get disengaged if he's not involved enough offensively. And so that could be, the biggest thing that holds him back. But I think overall, like if Spoelstra is as great of a coach as he's been, talked about, and if this organization and heat culture is such a real thing, then we should expect nothing but Kel'el Ware to take steps forward. Right?
You'd hope. I mean, if you were to ask me based on when I was happy when he was in the game, which is a bad sign for me to be picking a guy who I think this is more about who I think needs a breakout, who I think this could be a maker, because to me, the type of rookie year he had. Do you remember? I mean, you probably remember if you played fantasy basketball, but when Hassan Whiteside all of a sudden broke out, like the hottest thing in basketball, and then people realized, no, this guy is just a dumb player sometimes, and can't stay out of his own way. And you would find yourself, if you were rooting for the Heat, being like, you know what, we got to get him off the floor. I think this is a season where gets to show, okay, you got through on need and the opportunity becoming available in your rookie year, and you showed flashes, and that was enough to get consistent run. Not to mention Butler basically submarined their season in the middle. But this year is when he's really got to turn the corner in terms of being able to play within the team concept and know when to leverage all the talents that he does have, which are immense. And I think that's the single biggest thing. So those are my 5: Jaylen Johnson, Jared McCain, Kel'el Ware, Franz Wagner, and Brandon Miller.
All right, I'll quickly go through my 5 if I can remember them. Zaccharie Risacher, Scotty Barnes, Benedict Mathurin, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey. So there's 10 guys that we think need to have breakout years for obvious different reasons that we went through on today's podcast. If you guys like today's conversation, please leave us a 5-star rating and review over on the podcast, wherever you get your podcast at. And if you're on YouTube, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let us know what you guys think in the comment section below. Maybe there's a player we didn't bring up that you think should be a breakout candidate, and tell us why you think they should be. But Bob, you also have a podcast.
I do.
Talking about
it's called Fear the Fro. I'm on YouTube.
Right there on your mic. You've been
Spotify,
seeing this the whole time.
Yes. So if you want to hear about Cavs, that's basically where to go. And we'll talk some other stuff. But really, cannot wait for Media Day. I'm ready to kick off this season because we have to atone for the things that happened, of which I will never speak about again after September 15th or so.
Yeah, we will just put that under the rug. You know what happened in May will stay in May, right?
Yep.
Was it April too, or was it just May?
I don't know. I believe it was May based on the dates on my podcast. You'll see a precipitous fall off in volume that happened.
Fun podcast. I enjoyed those.
They were actually, yes, I enjoyed that as well, except making the song. But
the fans calling in for the mailbag was great. I enjoyed the fans freaking out about what happened. And we got to see that in back-to-back series for the Pacers. You see Game 2's collapse for Cleveland. Everybody's freaking out. And then you see the Game 1 collapse against New York. And just the podcast that came after that from Knicks podcasters was absolutely incredible.
It was. Those are my favorite days. That's the nice thing is you did it so quick. It was like a nice palate cleanse. I didn't even have to wait deep into the series. It's just like, now you all get to see what we saw. So,
oh, man. Well, that is going to do it for today's episode. Hopefully you guys enjoyed what we talked about. Like I mentioned earlier, please give us 5-star rating and reviews. Follow the show. Do what you got to do. But if you're not already, please follow us on Twitter at PacersPodSTP. I'm at Alex Golden NBA. My co-host, usually on the show, Fachi, is at _FACC. I give him a follow if you are not. But Pacer Nation, we hope you all have a great rest of your weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday. Me and Facci will be back for a ton of episodes, so hopefully you guys are looking forward to that as we continue our 5 days a week throughout the offseason, because that's what the fans have said they wanted. So with that being said, Pacer Nation, peace out.